Thank you.
Yeah, I think we are having great sessions back to back.
Yeah.
So what do we have next, Iria?
So next we have our next speaker is Thomas from Alpaqa. Forgive my way of pronouncing. He's going to be talking to us about how to get work done faster with Alpaqa Studio and Azure Cosmos DB. Welcome, Thomas. I got hooked there for a minute.
Hi, Iria. Hi.
Hi.
Hello, everyone. Yes, thank you for the introduction. Yes, my name is Tomasz Naumut from Alpaqa Studio. I'm really happy to be here. I'll be talking about our tool. It's a professional data studio for Azure Cosmos DB. Just as a quick note, please excuse my voice. I got a little cold today in the morning, so I'm trying to manage that. So Alpaqa Studio is a professional data studio for Azure Cosmos DB. It comes as a managed application. You can run it self-hosted if you need that extra layer of control, and a desktop edition is coming as well. Today's session is going to be a demo, actually. So I'll be showing to you Alpaqa Studio in action, and I really want to focus on the aspects how we help software developers in getting more work done faster when interacting with Azure Cosmos DB. So I want to make sure that they aren't put in the position that they have to write extra code just to do some basic management tasks. So this is where Alpaqa Studio comes in and tries to help in different stages of software development when using Azure Cosmos DB. And we'll be looking at 3 areas. So how do we interact with Azure Cosmos DB using our data studio? How we can look after after the data health, and how we can do some performance tuning. And afterwards, we'll be looking at the roadmap for Alpaqa Studio. But let me switch to screen sharing. Just exit the demo. There we go. So Alpaqa Studio, as you can see on my screen share, is a data studio that is able to connect to Cosmos DB. What we see on the screen is on the left-hand side, we see what Cosmos DB accounts I have connected. We see my accounts, databases, some containers. And on the right-hand side, we show you the data. So the challenges that our customers were facing all the time, they tell us that whenever they were building an application, they felt a kind of difficulty of verifying, is the data in the shape I expect? When I'm writing the data, what is actually landing in the database? So the portal from within Azure gives you some opportunities of verifying the content of the document, looking at individual documents at the JSON format, but it's very difficult to get the bigger picture. And this is where Alpaqa Studio comes in. So what we did here is we show you the contents of a container. Let me just zoom in a bit. And what we did is we actually look at every single individual document, and we try to discover what fields you have in there, what properties you have in there, and we group them in a basic, simple, and something that's easy to understand in a table view. What a lot of users expect from a data studio. So we see that we have the field that's called ID, a mandatory field in Cosmos DB is grouped together. Then we see the field state. It's always a string. We see it's a partition key, and it's grouped together. So it's really great when you come into a project that's already in development to see what type of data I'm dealing with. Or when you're building data, you're building a product and you have potential bugs in the software that happens initially and later in phases of the project as well, that sometimes maybe data is missing. We have the address field. We see an entry here. We see an entry that's missing. Maybe that's expected, maybe not. It's a NoSQL database, so some fields can be there, some fields could be missing, but still, it's very difficult to discover those potential anomalies when you just look at the JSON view in the portal, and it's extremely easy and comfortable to discover when you use a table view like ours. So we see that we have some data in here. We see the addresses. Let's go further. We see another example here. We see a field that's called is open. So we have some data in here, whether the business is open or not. And we can spot that something might be off. We see that there's a value true, a Boolean. Sometimes there's a 0. Maybe it's an indication of the value false. We don't know. So we'll be looking at it in a second when we look after the data health. But already that basic view gives you great power because you really see what's happening. Another one, when we go even further, we see some potential typos. So we see a field that's called postal code, postal underscore code, postal code. So again, a scenario when you have a lot of developers working on a project, there could be a typo somewhere in the code base. And it's really it's really difficult to spot that when you look at basic JSON view. So I'll be zooming in and out in the screen, but I hope that's easy to follow. So with Alpaqa Studio, in the basic, simple table view, you can really spot anomalies, discover what type of data you're really dealing with. And it's really great when you want to get an overview of what's happening. Another time saver here is that you have the ability to actually edit data. So think of a scenario when you're building an application, you see a small mistake in the database. You could either change your code base, add a special case for repairing that data on the fly as it's being discovered, or you could maybe do those edits and fixes on the fly while looking at the data. So one example is editing individual documents. So scenario of building an application, testing how would the application behave if the data changes, or maybe there's something different and missing. So what I can do, I can just click here and I can just correct a mistake. And I can just do it. The update has been performed on the fly behind the scenes, and I didn't have to fiddle with JSON. I didn't have to be too careful with editing and being worried that I'll destroy my JSON format. I just corrected that one field. So it's really great for those individual surgical operations. And returning to our example that we had here, we see postal code, POD code, and so on. Those are some potential mistakes that could be fixed in code, but you can just fix them quickly using Alpaqa Studio. So what I want to do here is I would just to make sure that postal POD is renamed to postal code, and the same with the camel case. So what I can do, I can just right click on a field like that. I can go to our bulk operations mode. I can say I'd like to rename a field. And now I have the ability to say, well, let's just fix the field name. And I don't want to do that edit for the current document. I actually want to do this for all documents in the container. So it's really dangerous and powerful, but it truly is a lifesaver and time saver. And it's one of the most common, most popular features in Alpaqa Studio, actually. And we get a lot of positive feedback because of that. So I will just do this now. Off we go, the operation started, and what happens now is we load document in batches, we edit them, we fix them, we did all tests, we did all safety controls here, so you can be reassured that that operation will just happen behind the scenes easily, and you don't need to write that code for that. So it's done, it's a smaller container. Let's just refresh the view, and when we go there, we see that one of those incorrect field names has disappeared. So we managed to clean up the data. And that's really, really, really helpful. In that scenario, we were really editing live data. And we gave you the opportunity to correct some mistakes. So you get an overview, you see what data you have, you can do individual edits, you can do bulk edits, and there's more to come when you discover the tool on your own. A quick note, in the table view, you have the opportunity to change to other views as well. So if you really want to use the basic JSON view, it's available in here. So you can look at individual documents, maybe in group, maybe you discover something. And you also have the tree view here, and that's great. As the name suggests, it's a tree format, but it's really amazing when you're coming new to a project and you want to look at the structure of the document. So instead of trying to decipher JSON, you just look, you can collapse and expand, and it really helps to get the gist of, what do I have in the data? How does it look like? What do I have in here? And that's another feature that really gets a lot of positive feedback from our customer base. And with that section, I will stop in that interactive section of looking at the data. So I showed you how you can look at it, how you can explore a little bit, and now we'll be looking after the data health. So let's switch to the table view again. And I mentioned that we have a potential anomaly in the data. So we see a field that's called is open. Sometimes it's a true, a Boolean value. Sometimes it's 0, a number. So there's some indication when we just look at what is it, 20 documents, we can increase the page size to maybe 100. So you have a potential indication there could be an error in the source code. Yes, somebody who's writing the data is making a potential mistake. And again, it's something you can fix on the fly when you work with the data. In your code, you could just correct those small mistakes while reading and writing documents. But it's another effort and another potential risk. So that's something that you would like to avoid. And with Alpaqa Studio, we can look at this in more detail. So 100 documents, it's not enough. It's just a sample. So what we built here in the tool, we have the so-called Schema Analyzer. So before we go in, let's just take a look at one of those individual documents one more time. So you see, this is how the documents look like. You know the JSON view inside out. So we have some fields here. We have the field is open. It's a true in that document. Another one we open here. We see there's a 0. So this is what we are after. We want to discover if it's a mistake across the entire database, entire container, or maybe it's something that's just local to that 100 document page. So what we do, we'll go to the Schema Analyzer here. And I already rerun the scan before our presentation. So what we do here is we show you all the properties, all the fields that we've discovered, pardon, that we discovered in the container. We show you the name that we've seen. We show you the probability. How often have we seen a document, a field like that? So let's go to the field is open. You see that we've seen it 100% of times. So it exists in every single document in that container. And we see that the data type, something is consistent. Sometimes it's a Boolean, sometimes it's a number. We know that sometimes it's expected, sometimes it's something that you want to have in your data, but it's not always the case. So let's look at this. So we can expand that name here to get more information. And now we see that actually the Boolean in here, the data type, has been seen 80% of times, and the number has been seen 20% of times. So what does it mean? I can hover over those fields. Unfortunately, the tooltip doesn't scale here, but what I see here, the Boolean, it tells me that the false value has been seen 0 times, the true value has been seen 900 times, and for the number, I see that the min and max is 0. So it's a strong indication that actually we had a small bug in the application that instead of writing a false value, we've been writing a 0. So now we have two paths. We can correct it in the application, or we can just make the small bug, kill the small bug in the application and just clean up the data easily. So let me show you how we can do that. From that Schema Explorer and Schema Analyzer, whenever you see something, you can just right-click on that field or on the value or the data type, and you can ask Alpaqa Studio to show you all matching documents. What happens behind the scenes, we write a small query. Afterwards, you can look at this here in the expert mode, but we did a query for you and we selected all the documents that have that special property. And we know it has the value 0. We know it's always a number, so we just want to fix it. So I can right-click on it. I can say, hey, fields, edit the field here. I would like to change the data type to a Boolean, and it should be a false. And we want to do the change to all documents matching current query. Let's do it. Again, what happens behind the scenes, we read all the documents, we do those changes for you. And once the operation is finished, we'll be able to refresh the field, the view, and we'll discover that the data has been fixed. So what Alpaqa Studio gives you is really the ability to really interact with the data. Our customers were telling us that they had the feeling of having a barrier between them and the data. So they can interact using the driver, they can interact using the custom code that they write, but very often they really want to look behind the scenes in those interactive scenarios and see, is what I'm writing in the data actually landing in the database? How does the data look like? Can I really extract something? Can I write a simple query using the tool? And this is what we gave here. So it's really the ability of looking after, exploring, discovering some data health issues and fixing them. Okay, I think the operation is finished. Yes, it's a completed task. So let's go to the Schema Analyzer and rescan it quickly. And we should be able to discover once it's done that the small mistake here has been fixed. Well, we'll return to that in a second. And that we don't have that data anomaly in our database. Okay, let me just zoom out a little bit. All right, it has been loaded. We see it's open. beautiful 100% of times, always a Boolean. And when I look at this, I see some false and truths in the data. So we've been able to recover from a potential problematic mistake easily. The same, we see that we still have some typos in the postal code field name here. So again, that's something that we could fix from here and have it done. And I have to tell you, in the past, I've seen a lot of ways of writing the field name email with dash, with camel case, with everything. So we've been doing that quite often in the past. So that's why we really wanted to see the future. And again, that's something that's heavily used with Alpaqa Studio today when we ask our customers. So please feel free to give it a go after the presentation. Now, we've been looking at, because of the time constraints, of course, I was just limiting myself to a couple of areas, but there's really a lot more features to discover in Alpaqa Studio. But we looked already at that interaction with the data. We looked up to data health, and in just a minute, we'll be looking at what you can do about performance tuning with Alpaqa Studio. But before we jump in, I wanted to show you something else as well. So when we interact with the data, we often do some edits, we often do some changes, as I did now. And that's something that happens very often in dev. So you're building an application, you're testing something, you want to get your test data back in and see how your application behaves. And that asks for some easy way of moving data around within Cosmos DB. And we started doing that. We have the first iteration ready for you. So what you can do with Alpaqa Studio is you can really easily copy and paste containers. So it's really a small Azure data factory built in Alpaqa Studio for those small operations, like moving data from A to B. So what I will do now, let me just close that for a second. I will take my small container that's called Yelp Business as seed that I typically use to restore my demo data. And what I can do, I can just say I'd like to copy the container. And now I'd like to paste it to our container that I used for the demo. So I can just say, well, paste the container here. And what happens, we tell you, okay, you'll be copying data from A to B. You'll be asked what you want to do when when we have a conflict. So maybe I'd like to override the document because I really want to restore the demo that I had. And if I run it, I'd be able just to get my data back. So it's really great for developers when you start building applications, when you want to see what happens, when you want to do some changes. You can have a lot of experimental data and just move it back and forth, or just pull a quick copy of your data. And that's really, really powerful and heavily used as well. What we added, because it's so popular, we added request unit limiting or throttling. So that's something that helps you to avoid potential side effects when you move a lot of data potentially from or I see a question I'll just answer in a second. So what we do here is we can really put some limits. So we can ask Alpaqa Studio to slow down and not exceed the limit that has been defined. So what it gives you the opportunity to avoid side effects in production if you maybe pull data off production or write it to production or do an edit. So I see a question come in from the audience. Interfere with that in large database query. So the question is, how do request unit limits interfere with that? In large databases, a query might not run because it exceeds the limits. Yes, so we have no ability to avoid that. So if there is a huge load on the database, we'll be struggling at the tool, but we'll be trying to reconnect to rerun the query. For queries in the data view that we showed you before, we'll be timing out after, I think, 30 seconds, and we'll tell you there was a problem, and we'll give you exact details, whether that was D429 or another error. When we move data around, we try to get to the request unit level that you have defined. So for example, on the target, I could say, I don't want to use more than 700 request units, and that's what we'll do. But in case of those 700 request units not being available, we'll just struggle and slow down. With Alpaqa Studio and operations in progress, you can reconfigure. So when we run it, you can go to the task and you can change it to speed up, slow down, or you can pause the task, or you could also abort. So you have that control. One remark, that 5,000 here is not hard-coded. We discover from Cosmos DB what is the amount of request units provisioned for the database. So in my case, for the demo, we have a serverless database here. So that's why it's 5,000. If you have more, that slider will let you do more. I hope that answered the question, but if not, please just follow up here. Okay, but let's just, start the copy of the container. What will happen now, we start reading and writing. We show you how those request units behave. And again, you can go here, as I mentioned, reconfigure the task, and you could say, well, let's just limit it heavily on writing, and it should start slowing down. And now the data is being, so it starts to slow down slowly and adapt to the new threshold that has been defined. So that's the operation here. Okay, I think we have 15 minutes. Perfect. So, but the takeaway here is that we have the support built in for those easy operations with moving data around. We have that ability of editing data in bulk. When you edit data in bulk, again, you can provide those request unit thresholds. So inside out through the application, whenever there's operation that runs over a longer period of time or touches more than a couple of documents, you have the ability to control how many request units you want to provision for that operation. So it's operation based, it's not per connection. Based on user feedback, we could potentially add that, but today it's really per operation. So you really need to look after that when you run those operations. But the safety net here is the ability to reconfigure. So when you notice something's happening, you can quickly pause, reassess, change the limit, run again. Excellent. So we looked at two areas. We looked at interacting with the data. We looked at some different views. I showed you how you can copy data between containers. You can copy data to new containers. You could repartition your container, because once a new container is created, you can provide a new partition key and so on. So you have all those features built in already. So it's truly a lifesaver, time saver, sorry, when working with that. You looked at editing documents individually, and you looked at editing documents in bulk. And there's, of course, more of those features hidden. So when you log into Alpaqa Studio, look at the small buttons, use right click, see what's available, and you can always just contact us, and we'll be more than happy to jump on a brief call to show you the tool in action to address your specific use case. For interaction with the database, you have a lot of ways of writing a query. So you can either use that basic form in here. That's great for simple, quick operations. You can use a visual query builder if you just want to click around and explore a bit. So that's available under the button Query Builder. And if you really want to go wild and write a big query, you can switch over here to the expert mode, and you get a lot of real estate to write the query. And you actually also get an auto-completion here. So it's not just, syntax, but you get auto-completion for, field names, because we scan these containers, we see the schema, and we give you some advice. We help you writing those queries faster. All right. So data health, that was another topic that we covered. We looked at how you can use the Schema Analyzer. Oops, I closed it by accident. How you can look at the Schema Analyzer, how it can help you to see what types of data do I have, how you can find matching documents, and how you can use bulk edit to fix potential anomalies. And now the third section will be a little bit of performance tuning. Some of those features are already available. Some of those features are in dev. So we'll be switching to my dev environment in a second, and we'll be releasing them in the next week or so. But I really wanted to show it to you today during the conference. So performance tuning for Alpaqa Studio and Cosmos DB, it's an important topic. So we know request units, there are some limits. You can over-provision, under-provision. And Alpaqa Studio starts to help in those areas. So the first thing that we did is we gave you the opportunity to actually see what's happening. So let me run a simple query. So let's do a basic filter here. Let's do some sorting around the query. So I'm just filtering on the state, Arizona, and I'm sorting by timestamp to get the newest documents here. So we get the result. It's quick because it's an interactive tool. But what happens if we do a lot of those operations? That could be very expensive. So let's switch to the performance tab. And we show you more data, more information about the query that we just ran. And we see that the request charge was quite high here. It was 10 request units for that simple basic operation. And that container has, whatever, we were running some scans, 1,000 or 2,000 documents. So it's a small container and a quite expensive query. So, the question is why? Of course, if we run a lot of those queries, it could make sense to optimize here. So it's always a trade-off. If you don't run that query that often, it doesn't make sense. Sometimes it does. But let's imagine we do a lot of queries like that. And what we get, the Cosmos DB team, they provided great index advisory features in the driver, so they exposed and we are able to use them. So actually the query engine tells us, what indexes have been used and what are potential indexes that could help you with running the query faster. So we see basic query, we see 10 request units, but on that performance tab, you see an index summary, and we show you what indexes have been used, potentially, utilize index, state, timestamp, and the Cosmos DB team provides us with some suggestions, what type of indexes you could potentially add. So you see that there's a suggestion to add the index on the state and on timestamp. So well, let's just do it. So Alpaqa Studio has a built-in index editor. So I just click here. We open it on the side. We see the definition of the indexing policy. We see that the current indexing policy says, well, we just index everything. E tag is excluded. And there's a new index that was suggested by the performance advisor, ascending on state and ascending on timestamp. So, well, let's just do it. So let's just click save. What happens? We submit the query. It's a small container, so we see that the reindexing has been done. So let's just close it. Let's rerun the query, and let's hope, yes. Let's see. So we are down from 10 request units down to 3. And we see that the index here has been used. So it's really something that is actionable. You can try out your query here in Alpaqa Studio. You can see what are the costs. We provide you with more details that there will be more explanation on that later, but not during the session. But we really give you all the actionable information here and the ability to quickly add an index and see what's the outcome. So you can use Alpaqa Studio to copy a subset of the data, see what happens, do some experiments, and then apply it to production. So the index editor is available always on every container. Right-click, edit indexing policy. You see a visual representation of the index. If you need to go more and do something most advanced that you think it's not covered here, you can switch to JSON, or maybe there's a new feature that will be added by Cosmos DB team. You can just edit JSON here or use the visual representation for quick edits and just, do those changes. All right, so this is something that is already available. So when you log into Alpaqa Studio, you'll be able to see what index do you have, what are the suggestions, what are the proposed indexes here, and you can just use them. So it's really, really helping and really easy to use. And we'd like to encourage you to try it out. Now I'll switch to something that's coming. So it's a little teaser. We just have some finishing touches on that. Oops, I'm sorry, it's timeout. So I just quickly log in the meantime. What we have here is the index advisor that looks at your documents in your container. So we're looking at, let me just zoom in a little bit. So it's the same container, you know it already. But what we added here is the ability to discover, what is actually the impact of my index on my write performance, because that's something that's very easy to be overlooked. So we look at the indexing policy that you have defined. So very simple indexing policy. If you've used that before, you know that, we include everything. So slash and the star. So we include everything and just one field is excluded. So after running the Schema Analyzer, so you've seen that already. So Alpaqa Studio is aware of, what fields do you have? How often are there in here? Are there like, where do we have it? Attributes, look, there are some objects and some embedded entries and so on. So there's, potential of tens of hundreds. You never know. There could be an array suddenly that would be indexed. So there's a huge potential implication of indexing everything. And that's the suggested approach, to index everything, just to be on the safe side when you write your queries. But once you start looking after request units, your consumption, you start analyzing your data access patterns. Do you have the write-heavy traffic or write-heavy application? Then looking at that section really makes sense. So what we do here is we looked at every individual documents. We had the Schema Analyzer at work. We've seen how many fields you have per document, and we see your indexing policy. And now we tell you, hey, actually you're indexing up to 52 properties. Every single property is an expense. So let's switch to the advisor's view, and we tell you, well, it looks like you're at the maximum of potential write costs here. So we expect that when you write one of those largest documents, you land somewhere at 15 request units when writing a document, and that's the max. And with no indexing, of course, that's not something that you'd like to have, but you see that there's a lot of potential to improve. And again, that's something that's easily overlooked. And with Alpaqa Studio, it's very easy to work with that. So let's just try to save a bit of your money and our money. So let's just exclude something. So I will just exclude attributes and everything that's in there, because I'm never searching afterwards. Let's assume that. I do this, and we should tell you, okay, if you apply that, you'll be indexing a lot of less properties, and so on. So we really help you with seeing what is the implication of having that index. It shouldn't discourage you of indexing everything, but it should make you aware of what could potentially happen, and it should give you a better understanding of, what are the implications of doing A or B. And now the advisor tells us, okay, the approximate cost will be around 10 request units. So it's 5 request units saved. You can do the math. If you do a lot of write operations, larger documents, you know what that means. But that's something in depth out pretty soon. We still have to cover composite and spatial indexes. That's why it's not there, because we didn't want to release something that's incomplete. But it's really, truly fun to use, and really gives you a good understanding of what would happen if you deploy that indexing policy. All right, so that be that sneak peek into what's in depth. And I think there are just 2 slides I wanted to show you quickly. So reminder, managed, self-hosted, and desktop. Self-hosted available today, managed available immediately. So you just log in, you go to alpaqastudio.com. There's a sign up button. There's a free edition that gives you a lot of those features that you've seen already. They're available to everyone. And desktop and command line interface are in depth. They're coming at a later stage. We're still collecting feedback on some of those, and the desktop edition for Windows will be the first one that we release. And where we are at today, roadmap-wise. So you've seen a lot of those features around exploring and interacting with the data. Yeah, so this is something that we have today, and you can play with that already now. Tuning performance, that's something that's currently in development. So there's a lot of more features to come, but already the things we have are really powerful. So please give them a go, try it out, get in touch, give us your feedback, and tell us what your needs are. In Alpaqa Studio, we advertise for a survey about performance tuning. There's also a link to that on our website. Please go there, share your performance tuning challenges with us, so that the first release of those new features potentially covers your needs already, in the first iteration. That'd be really great. Once we're done with the first iteration, import and export, more advanced, more features, exporting to Excel to CSV. It's partially there, but it'll be available for the full containers. Take a look at this. The same with importing data. This is something that we get a lot of requests. Hey, we have that file lying around. We just need to upload it, and we don't want to go through all the tooling. We just, we want to use Alpaqa Studio, drag, drop the file, and just have it there. It's in the pipeline, and once those features are available, then we'll look at automation and CLI, because we'd like to make sure that, schema scanning should be available as a command line tool. So maybe you want to have it as a part of your build. Is the test data in the same shape that this was before? Do I have the same patterns? Do I have the same data types? Easily automated. And the same with copying data, importing, exporting, and so on. Well, thank you very much for your attention. I hope that was okay, despite of my voice today, and that you were able to follow, that my microphone wasn't muted. No, it wasn't. Great. Thanks a lot.
Wow, thanks a lot, Thomas. I think that was amazing. Like for data lovers and really passionate about seeing their data and all, I think it's really, really, really cool to see that. I really love the fact of, how we started off like those common data mistakes where you see like there's a different data type. I think that's something like, like data engineers or scientists get to encounter where they have like different data types and you're trying to fix that. And for like, beginners who are not, new, you have like the tool that kind of like advances one from like a beginner to an expert. You can see how you can interact with the data. And then like, and the fact that, as you said, performance and RUs are something that everyone talks about when they're using their data. So seeing that you can, adjust your RUs or see how it affects your queries and be able to do some of those tunings and those index and just seeing like the advisor, feature coming soon. I think it was like just awesome. And like, I don't know where to start from, but like, I think every piece, like from the data health, every piece was just like off the chart. Thanks a lot. Dilip, like, do you have questions?
I don't have a question, but I had a comment. It's really exciting to see such a beautiful visual tool for the data, right? It always makes you feel a little more closer to the data. I think the way we can see the schemas and create the queries and find out which fields to index or not to index, how to save money with respect to RUs and sort of this, I think the next steps that you indicated, right, that is work in progress, those are also like pretty exciting stuff, right? I think ability to performance tune and fine tune aspects of things, I think it will be greatly beneficial. Yeah, it's very exciting, Thomas. Thank you for giving us this session. It was really...
Yeah, I really love that. And the fact that you can get like a tree view and a structure of your document. So I'm coming in new to the data and I'm, I really can just like the whole graphical interface, actually just being able to like walk through. I think that's really good.
Thank you very much for your feedback. It's really enjoyable building the tool, and this really aligns with the feedback that we've been getting. So we started as a very interactive tool. That was the initial goal, to give software developers that direct raw access to the data. So of course it doesn't apply to every single scenario with Cosmos DB because it has different aspects of how it can be used. But in those scenarios, when you really interact, you're right, to build an application, just use the database for some data storage easily, then having Alpaqa Studio, just a data studio, is truly helpful. And that was the feedback that we've been getting. And once we got there, the next big challenge was precisely that, the performance tuning. That's something that we kind of knew from the start because we had the same issues, but first, we needed a data studio to be there so that we can add those performance tuning features. There's more and more to come. And it's really heavily based on the user feedback because there's no point in building a tool just for ourselves. Of course, it's fun. But truly, so it's really a big ask to everyone in the audience to just get in touch. If you like something, if you'd like to see something built in, or maybe even if there's something that you think that it wouldn't be useful, please let us know, because every single signal from the outside world is really powerful and helpful. So please tell us, every type of feedback. Even single line email helps, so don't be shy.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. It was great.